Before we show you pictures of the small but loud, deeply unnerving and dangerous chorus of people calling for Americans to throw themselves on the sacrificial altar of the virus in the name of a good Donald Trump economy and liberty, it's worth noting this polling out of Michigan, which has been the site of some of these protests, particularly targeted at the governor. After weeks of attacks, getting called everything from a tyrant to a Nazi, Governor Gretchen Whitmer's approval rating in Michigan of her handling of the coronavirus is considerably higher than the president's. And yet, a familiar marriage between Trump TV propaganda, wealthy right-wing interests, and a base that runs on resentment have created this phenomenon we've all seen, which again is small in absolute numbers, but really one of the most disturbing I have seen in my time covering public life, I gotta say. People huddled together in cities throughout the country today on the steps of the Capitol in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I guess, putting their bodies where their mouths are, so to speak. Yesterday in Denver, Colorado, this is what happened when a nurse stood at an intersection to block protesters to remind people of the human toll of all this. Go to China. The entire phenomenon seems reverse engineered to solve a very obvious political problem, which is this. The country right now is going through literally unprecedented economic devastation and misery and mass death at a scale that's impossible to contemplate, while the conservative base's beloved leader is at the helm of all of it. So there's got to be someone else to blame. For more on this phenomenon and the president's propaganda arm that encourages it, I'm joined by Angela Corazon, president of Media Matters of America. You know, Angela, there sort of seems to be three ingredients here, which is that there are actual people who are actually upset. And I saw a guy interviewed in Michigan about not being able to buy fertilizer. And I have to say, like, I am sympathetic to people being frustrated and upset about where everyone is at right now. Like, it is genuinely frustrating and upsetting that, you know, people can't do the normal things. So there's that. There's a sort of normal kind of right-wing interest. And then there's, to me, it just seems to me that the Trump TV aspect of this is the largest. Like, how much have they gone all in on these protests?
Oh, they've gone all in. I mean, in the last week, they've given it, there's been 87 individual segments discussing, promoting, advocating for these protests. And none of them are they criticizing them. Just a little bit of comparison. If you look at the coverage that Fox News gave the Michigan event, that was more than the coverage, way more than the coverage that they gave to the Women's March in 2017. Just that one small event got more coverage from Fox News than the entire Women's March.
It's striking to me also, it is the case that the folks at Fox News itself, like, they aren't coming to the building, they're socially distancing, they all have remote cameras. Like, they're the people that run the network from the business and HR side don't seem to think like it's fine for everyone just to get together and let's go at it.
That's right. And I actually think that's a good point, because it's true that from a corporate policy, in terms of their practices, they're not violating the social distancing. But what's really interesting, because I think that this is a good illustration of the feedback loop between Fox and the larger right-wing ecosystem and these individuals, because, you know, most of these Facebook events, we tracked, you know, more than 75 of them across the country. It started popping up on April 10th. So the question is, what was happening in right-wing media before April 10th? And some of the most highly trafficked videos on the 9th, and a few days before him, but on the 9th in particular, was Tucker Carlson and other Fox News segments calling for an end to the national lockdown, making an impassioned plea about liberty. And it's an important point, because one of the things that took place in those few days before you started to see these events beginning to pop up was that Fox News stopped making the argument. I mean, they were still saying it, but originally they were saying we have to be willing to sacrifice grandma and grandpa for the sake of the economy. But they made a switch. And, you know, starting on April 7th, April 8th, April 9th, they started saying that it's not about the economy, it's about liberty and freedom. And that's why we need to end these national lockdowns. And immediately after is when you started to see these things popping up. And look, some people get the message, right? It's not just these astroturfy kind of groups or these national level groups putting in. Some of these events are being run by elected officials. In Maine, the leading organizer up there is a sitting congressman. In Michigan, it's a state. It was a state representative and an advisory member to Women for Trump that were really the leaders and the vanguards of these events. So they sort of saw that opportunity, right, where Fox sort of creates a demand, then you go out there and satisfy it, and Fox in turn rewards you by bringing you on, just like they did with the sheriffs. You know, if you were a sheriff and you announced that you were not going to fine people or punish people for violating the orders of the state, Fox would invite you on to celebrate you, right? So that's what they create the demand, and then they're able to satisfy it and reward it, promote it, and amplify it.
There's this Judge Pirro on Fox the other night had this. She had a long monologue ranting about this, but there's one part that stuck out to me. I want to play for you. Take a listen.
We want to go back to work, feed our families. And as the governors sit there and pontificate, we are the ones experiencing the reality that for every percentage drop in employment, there are 5,000 to 10,000 deaths occurring.
I mean, first of all, you're at work. You don't have to go back to work. You're literally, your show is, that's your work, and you're at a remote camera. But also, I just thought this was interesting. As the governors sit there and pontificate, they have found, I mean, the problem here, right, is like, how do you do a Tea Party, but it's Donald Trump in the White House, right? How do you capture this kind of sense that people have that things are amiss and awry and bad, but you've got Donald Trump in the White House? And here's the answer. The governors, the category of the governors, they're the ones to blame. And we've seen the president essentially work hand in glove with that as a kind of national strategy for actually battling the virus.
That's right. And I think you bring up a very good point there, because that's exactly a big piece of this, is that, you know, originally he was going to be the decision maker with respect to ending these lockdowns, right? But immediately retreated from that position. And it was a very important thing when he started to shift, because he said, I'm authorizing the governors to make the decision. And that's when Fox News started to really aggressively begin to push for this idea that it was time to end national lockdowns. And in particular, and this is where it's important, where the misinformation becomes fuel for these calls and these demands. So one of the things you heard on Fox News that was not true, right? You still have to outsource it, is that in Michigan, they banned the sale of the American flag. They said that a bunch of times on Fox. That was repeated over and over again. And it sounds like, wow, maybe Michigan has gone too far. You know, you're not even able to buy a good old-fashioned American flag there. And that's the point, is that you create this demand, you fuel it with misinformation, which allows for you to then, to attack the governors for overstepping, right? And these individuals are getting back out there to sort of correct things and balance things out, right? They're only responding to the most unreasonable restrictions that don't seem to make any sense.
Right.
But they actually underscore another issue, which is that these governors, who all disproportionately happen to be Democrats, right, or opposed to Trump, are bad.
Yep. Angelo Corazon, thank you so much for running through that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.